My name is J.W. Steckervetz, and I've been making swords and knives for the past 20 years. I started out doing stock removal for stage combat weapons used in live stunt shows, and after that fire had been lit, I knew I had to become a bladesmith. At the time, I didn't know anyone who actually used a hammer and anvil to make a knife, so I started down a long road of self-education. It's been quite a journey, and I know it's far from over. Currently, I do demonstrations at the New Jersey Renaissance Fair and the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair, and I teach knife-making classes on weekends throughout the winter and spring. Today I'm going to share with you the method that I use to make a forge-welded wire rope knife. So I'm starting off with a 8-inch piece of cable. It's about an inch in diameter, made up of 128 different strands of high-carbon steel. It's just a non-alloy steel with a carbon content of about 0.8%. So I place it down the fire, and I'm heating up the piece. You'll notice that some of the grease that was on there to stop it from rusting actually sort of burns off. When I brush it, I want to make sure that I'm rotating the piece, but I always want to rotate it so that we're not unraveling the twisted strands. After I brush it off, I add some borax, put it back in the fire. Now I'm going to bring it up to forge welding temperature. Just a few light taps. You can actually hear an audible difference as the weld actually starts forming. Don't be afraid to go back and change something if you didn't like the way that it looked the first time that you did it. Here I'm just correcting some of the visual appeal of the piece that I'm working on. I didn't really like how that weld was going a little crooked. I like to form a nice square because later I'm going to lock it into a vise, and it really helps to be able to twist the piece. So I've turned this piece around, again brushing it off. Getting it nice and clean. We want to remove any oxidation. And the borax acts as a flux, which will help carry out any impurities. So it just takes a minute or so for it to come up to welding temperature. Again, just a few light taps. And that weld is done. Now I'm going to add some more borax. And I apply it pretty liberally. And I put it in my gas forge to heat the whole piece up. Then I lock it into the vise using a pair of vice grips. I just twist with the strands, bring it tighter. I don't want to go so tight as to actually break the strands of the wire rope. So after I'm done twisting, I like to keep my anvil clean. I heat up the piece, wire brush it off. Adding more borax. Then I return it back to the fire. There I'm taking the clinker out of the tweer, making sure that I have enough airflow, because airflow is really important to get this up to welding temperature. I also like to take my coal and build sort of a dome. Now I'm really only trying to get about half the piece welded. I don't want to weld the entire knife, just the area that's going to be the blade. So just a few hits, starting to set our initial welds. Again, I cleaned it off, adding more borax. Bringing it back up to forge welding temperature. So at first I'm flattening it down, making a sort of bar stock out of our wire rope. I'm just hammering it down, drawing out my point. I like to keep my heat pretty high as I'm forging out at first. Here I'm actually starting to push the blade down and thin it out towards the edge. Just working that edge down, drawing it thinner. Now as I hammer this way, the whole entire blade starts to curve as well. I counteract that curve in the blade by going back and hammering the spine and drawing out a distal taper at the same time. If the blade needs any more correction, I can always lay it on the flat of the anvil, spine down, and hammer against the blade and straighten it out that way as well. I just find that typically as I hammer out that spine, that it sort of straightens out the blade pretty naturally. Again, going back, just cleaning up my edges. I want to make sure that everything is a nice consistent thickness. Now I switch over to a different hammer, and I only use this hammer for creating the toil on a knife. I like the way that the actual head of that hammer is shaped, and it actually helps give a lot of leverage in there, and I can really move metal very, very quick. Now where that metal was upset a little, I just want to hammer it down. Now we're finishing up with the shape of the blade. So I'll turn it around, bring the very end almost up to welding temperature again, and I'm just rounding that out. I don't need to, but I feel that it's a lot more comfortable in the hand that way. Now I'm just using the horn of the anvil just to give a little bit of curve to the handle. That way it fits into the hand really nice. Just smoothing it out. Then I move over to the grinder, and I like to use a flap wheel. And it really is very quick work. Just knocking all that scale off. Now that's done with a 36 grit flap wheel. This flap wheel is actually a combination of 120 grit plus 3M abrasive interwoven in between each of the flaps. Really gives a nice finish to it. Then I just take it over to one of the belt grinders, clean up my edge, draw my point down. I like to make sure that the edge I'm leaving about a pencil lead thickness. I also try not to hit the spine too much. I want to leave as much of that twisted strand visible. I think it really makes for a neat visual impact of the knife itself. I clean up the toil using the wheel. Just so happens that they're pretty close to the same shape. Then just cleaning up the very back of the knife. Then I take it over to my stamp. One good solid hit. And my blade is marked. Then I just straighten it out. Making sure there's no curves in my blade. I like to use my gas forge for this because I like to let them soak. This is the oil, and I keep an old hammerhead laying around that I heat up to go ahead and put into my oil. And I like to bring the oil up between 128 and about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Quick check with the thermometer. It's up to temperature. Now this is about after 6 minutes or so, just soaking in the gas forge. And it's about 1540 degrees. Just keeping it in the oil until it actually stops boiling. Making sure the blade is straight. Cool. Now I gave the blade a quick polish. Then I submerged it in acid. And about 3 minutes in the acid, I can leave it in longer if I want a deeper etch. Pull it out, wipe it off, neutralize the acid. And there you have it from start to finish. A forge welded wire rope knife. Again, my name's J.W. Steckerbets, and I really appreciate you taking the time to watch us. Happy forging!